stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Good morning, world, and welcome to the Rektoff, your definitive podcast guide to the world of smart contract security and Web3 security research. I'm your co-host Gregory, bringing you the latest market insights, discussions about recent hacks, and the most thought-provoking issues facing our space today. In this podcast, we strive to create an informative atmosphere where professionals, smart contract security engineers, cybersecurity specialists, white hat hackers, and researchers can gather and engage with the cutting-edge topics of Web3.
Today, we're honored to have with us Peter Robinson, a luminary figure in the field of blockchain security. Peter's name is synonymous with innovation, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in cryptography and pioneering the new methodologies. With experience spanning across renowned organizations like RSA and Consensys, and his notable contributions in Uniswap, Dr. Robinson brings a wealth of knowledge and insights. In this episode, we'll discuss how artificial intelligence can aid in finding security vulnerabilities in smart contracts and explore the challenges and limitations in its use. We'll also investigate the latest trends and developments in blockchain security, especially how the landscape has evolved to mitigate breach attacks. We hope to provide our audience of dedicated white hat security engineers and cybersecurity professionals with a wealth of insights, trends, and ideas. So sit back, tune in, and let's embark on this knowledge-filled journey with Dr. Peter Robinson. We prepared.
Yeah. Ethereum Engineering Group worldwide.
Yeah. Well, it's I think it's good, giving people the opportunity to get a T-shirt that might be. I mean, yeah, they're interesting. I mean, interesting rather than just like your standard boring T-shirt. Hey.
When this idea comes to you?
What, to do the T-shirts?
Yeah.
Yeah. People have been asking about it for years. So yeah,
great.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was hard for us to synchronize because we have 3 different time zones all over the world. I'm in Canada. Igor is in Europe. In Belgium, and you're in Australia. But finally, yeah, glad that we did that. Managed to do that.
Yeah.
Great. So let's start. Let's start our session today.
Let's just we start from the question. So let's do the first question. Let's dive into the using of LLMs for spotting security flaws in contracts. Let's try to quantify it a bit. Peter, in your experiences working with AI, could you shed some light on the accuracy when it comes to identifying security vulnerabilities in smart contracts?
Yeah, so I don't think you want to think about it as accuracy. It's just finding anything is a pretty amazing effort all by itself. These are tools that aren't you, that you're just running, and they're able to find stuff, which I think is pretty amazing. So, so I did a bit of analysis, and where I had a contract which had no information at all, just stuff 1, stuff 2, stuff 3, and it was able to find bugs where the people who had a look at it, they couldn't find anything. And importantly, actually, I think the greatest insight that I've had is that AI tools can look at comments and the variable names, and from there infer how the code should be working, and can compare the code to the comments. And so, that's something that you're not going to get with a static code analysis tool.
Yeah. Okay, great. So the next question about AI. Now, while AI can be incredibly powerful, no solution is perfect. So I'm curious, what are some limitations or potential challenges you faced when you use ChatGPT or other LLMs for security testing?
Yeah. So what I found was that the tools sometimes are very, very sure about their answers. And even if their answers are completely wrong, they're still very sure about them. And so it means that you can't just be a novice blockchain developer and hope to use the tools to find bugs for you, because it might tell you to do the wrong thing. So I think that's probably the greatest challenge.
It feels to me that it kind of describes our nature of humanity, like the way that AI responses and the way it's sure about its answers. It's kind of sometimes, just explains like how humanity, like how human mind works sometimes. Yeah, because it was trained by our humans, and it's interesting point. But yeah, thank you for your answer.
Look, actually, if you're using your thoughts on trained by humans, it's an interesting personality trait, though. Probably coming from the personalities of the people who did the training. So, some cultures are more differential, and I think you'll often find, dare I say it, young blokes are far more, sure of themselves, even if they're wrong. Whereas if you were to have a woman who had trained it, then she's far more likely to think, well, am I sure that's the right answer? I mean, it's dare I say it, so in the mines in Australia, how you see these huge trucks. And so they've realized that having women drive those huge trucks is much better than men, because men are just so full of their own bravado often that they'll do more, take more risks. And so I guess it shows the risk-taking behavior of the people who train the AI tools, maybe, that they end up being certain when they're wrong.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We have actually the same story in Canada, like with trucks and drivers, like women drivers versus men drivers. Yeah, completely understandable. Yeah, so moving along, let's discuss something that goes hand in hand with AI testing, the prompting part. So this always has intrigued me. The way a subtle change in how we prompt ChatGPT can completely change the output of the prompt. So could you elaborate on how prompting affects the outcome of the tests? What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. So when I tried it, just saying, are there bugs, yielded like one set of results. And so I think Perplexity wasn't finding things. It was giving great information, but it wasn't finding anything. And then I think I added in, do you have any suggestions? And so it ended up coming down to how the AI tool interpreted the words I was using and how it classified bugs. And so, it really does come down to the language. And so I guess you've got to be quite careful with the language and maybe try a few things. The other thing with prompting is that often you can specify the type of output that you want, and you can ask for all sorts of details. And doing that sometimes can yield better results. And so I know some people I worked with ended up coming up with this very long prompt, and which gives columns, says put it out in markdown format, and even give me the line number where the error is. So don't just say there's an error, but give me line numbers as well. So you can do a lot with prompts.
Yeah, I just want to add here a couple more things. So from my personal experience, I've tested out a lot of different ways of prompting with ChatGPT and different other LLMs. So one of the interesting things is that to try to put your ChatGPT into the state of being somebody. So literally, you can type act like an auditor, like a smart contract auditor, and sometimes the results was much better than you just type it, please find vulnerabilities here. So yeah, that's one thing. And another thing is to add in the end of the prompt, to add, do it step by step. This kind of prompt usually adds some kind of, it's hard to explain, but yeah, it's just interesting how it works. When you add in the end, the type, you can type do it step by step. The results usually much better than you just prompt something to do, ask it to do something. So yeah, just interesting points here. Thank you so much for the answer here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's great. Yeah, I just wonder to know you have such a great experience in the past, right? And I know that you are right now working in the immutable, but you have a quite interesting journey before. Can you share with us a bit about your background and when you start your great experience, way?
Yeah, sure. So I've actually been working for more than 30 years, and yeah, the first few jobs were a bit haphazard. Worked in a worked in some short jobs that didn't last too long, and then I worked in an electronics company doing electronic stuff. And actually, one of the coolest things we did there was it would have, in a bowling ball, how you've got holes. And so they wanted this guy wanted us to be able to design something so it would spin the ball such that the holes would always be up. So yeah, and so it's all about differential, like working out the forces as you're spinning it and going, oh, there's less mass in this little area, and so having it come up. So I mean, that was a really cool company, but unfortunately, they ran out of money. And then I worked at a few large companies, and I worked at Lucent, Bell Lab Innovations, where we had 400,000 employees, and I worked on a project team of 2,500 people developing a telephone system. And it's amazing to see. I worked with someone who, I don't know, in part you could say it was his fault, because this guy, he'd used decimal, hex, and octal numbering all in the one set of code. And this was assembler code inside a telephone. And anyway, at the end of the day, that whole project was end of life, and which cost the company about $500 million, which was a darn lot of money. It's still a lot of money. But so it really showed to me that, like being really careful with the quality of code is super important, because it can end up, killing a whole project because people just can't get it working. Then I worked in some startup companies, ran my own startup company in Rome, in Italy, having an interactive street directory and a hotel booking system. So it was an early .com company, and again, went broke, didn't make any money. But then I ended up working at a company called RSA, which is a security company and IT security company. And so it's known for, the secure ID tokens, the numbers where the digits change, and, you have to enter in that two-factor authentication. So they invented that technology. And so I worked as a advanced development lead there, and so engineering manager, but also did a whole heap of patents at that company. And then went from there, Dell bought out RSA, so EMC bought RSA, Dell bought EMC. And it was interesting that, I was starting to work on blockchain technology in that era. And I think Dell didn't see any future in blockchain. And so anyway, then I ended up briefly being at Oracle, and anyway, that didn't work out for me, and then worked at Consensys. And so at Consensys, I co-founded the Protocol Engineering Group. So there's one guy who, curiously enough, is from Canada, who really, led the effort, and then two others of us came on board to really help build out the organization, and did some great things. Then moved across to research and worked in research in Consensys and developed some cross-chain technologies, and worked on stateless with Ethereum Foundation and did all sorts of stuff. And then ended up briefly working at Uniswap as a consultant, working on their bridge assessment report. And then have been working at Immutable, where we're doing great things in Web3 gaming. And so we're creating this platform that games companies can use to do NFTs within their game. So essentially allowing people to have in-game ownership. And so I think that's really powerful and is the future. I think that's where things are headed with gaming. And I think that Web3 gaming is going to be the next big thing in blockchain.
Yeah, and also as we start to talk about research, can you talk a bit more about the PhD thesis and all your, the research journey from your side, how it started, what the best articles in your opinion you had, and what the most interesting from them you can describe and share with us?
Yeah, sure. So doing a PhD is hard, and doing a PhD part-time is really hard. And so I started the PhD because I wanted to be, doing some new things, and I'd done enough patents and things at RSA. I probably could have had a PhD. So, when I started out doing the PhD, it was all about post-quantum crypto analysis. So saying if quantum computers turn up, will everything in blockchain break, or, what will break first and what could you do about it? And then I realized that wasn't actually a very big topic, and then looked at ephemeral blockchains and realized that to have an ephemeral blockchain that, starts, does stuff, and then is closed down, you needed a discovery service. So I came up with the Ethereum Registration Authority, ERAs, and then I came up with some pinning technology, which is sort of stuff that's highly related to where we now are at with rollups, where you're essentially putting the state onto a blockchain and trying to have it so you can provably show that the state's not correct. And then I also worked on cross-chain communications. And so I came up with 2 atomic cross-chain function call protocols. So a function call protocol is all about you're executing a function on one blockchain in one smart contract, and you can call it another function in another contract on another chain. And you could do that across, say, multiple chains. And say you could have return values coming back. And if any of the parts of it fail, then everything's rolled back. Otherwise, all the changes are applied. And so you ended up having these 2 protocols that were really essentially 2-phase commit protocols. And so that took 6 years, and blockchain changed a lot in 6 years. So, but it's all done now.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Yeah, that sounds like a very deep and fascinating journey. Yep. So that makes me to move to our next topic, is cross-chain communication between networks and security of that. So yeah, nowadays there are thousands of blockchain out there, and cross-chain communication became one of the hottest topic in Web3 space. So to begin with, I'd like to ask you to explain very briefly for our listeners, in case we have beginners here, what are the main methods of cross-chain communication and how it actually works? Just a quick high-level overview.
Yeah. So really what it comes down to is proving on one blockchain that something else has happened on a different blockchain, and then being able to do something based on that. And invariably, for most of the technologies, it comes down to some group of people getting together and saying, we saw, there was some function that executed in some contract on this source chain. It emitted an event. We saw it. We agree that it happened. And then on the target chain, you trust that if those people have signed it, it did happen. And that for most of the cross-chain communication that's out there today, that's how it works. It's just down to multi-sig, so multiple people signing and having maybe a threshold. And there are all sorts of fancy things on top, but that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, that describes everything. But one of the main issues with bridges, why they became that popular to my mind from the security perspective is that they were not that secure, and there were a lot of flaws within the contracts and architecture. So what are the main risks associated with cross-chain bridges, and what are the most popular attack vectors on bridges, in your opinion?
Yeah, so the real issue with cross-chain and DeFi bridges, so essentially ones where you're transferring value across, the big issue that you invariably have is that the model you have is you have, say, an ERC20 on the source chain, and then you lock up that that value on the source chain, and you then mint some new value on the target chain. And so if you're really successful, you might have like $100 million that you've pushed across. But what that means is that your bridge contract on that source chain owns $100 million. So if you can work out, how to hack that, you're doing well. And so the thing is that you've essentially created this huge honeypot. And invariably the contracts are moderately complicated. And so, that's why you can have big problems. And so a guy called Dr. Ermias Zabibi and myself, and with the help from some people at LeFi, created the cross-chain risk framework, where we analyzed, like how you could go about, like designing for, your architecture, your operations, your network, and your implementation, and just tried to analyze all the risks involved in cross-chain. And so there are quite a variety of issues. And I know you said, what are the main ones? But invariably it's because there's so many areas of possible issue of risk. And so if you look at it, you've got, say, the network layer. You've got, say, if the source blockchain, say if it can have a massive reorg, then, if the whole idea is that you're proving that something happened on the source chain, if it has some massive reorg, or if the people creating that blockchain could purposefully do sign two versions of reality. So, that's a problem. And that does happen, has happened. So you've got to really think about, when I'm doing cross-chain between two chains, do I trust the operators of those blockchains? And I mean, an example is, say, Ethereum Classic. It had like a 6-month level reorg. So imagine, does that mean that, you need to wait at least a year before you would dare, bridge anything from Ethereum Classic? And I think the answer is you probably can't bridge anything from Ethereum Classic, not securely, because someone could decide that they want to do a mega reorg and remove your transaction. So then you've got the architectural risk. And so it really comes down to how the bridge has been designed. And, so how many parties need to sign something? Are there ways for just say one party to, is there some centralization point somewhere? Because the fewer people you're relying on, the more likely you are to have problems. And so, there are a whole lot of different architectures, but some of them end up being more centralized than others. And so not having that centralization risk is important. And so some of it could be, so there's some block header, maybe many people can push that across, but then maybe there's some other thing that only certain parties can move across. Or maybe it comes down to you're just going to have one centralized party that controls who the signers are. So they can then kick everyone off and just have one signer suddenly. So, and then you've got the implementation risk. So some people will, like maybe they'll go off and they'll use an exotic programming language, or maybe part of it is that they'll be going to a blockchain and not many people know the language on that blockchain. So, for instance, say if you're going to, say, Solana, I mean, this has been one of the problems with Solana, is one of the hacks really came down to not enough people understood the programming language on Solana, so could understand that, hey, that looks like there's a bug there. Whereas if it was on Ethereum and if it was in Solidity, more people would have been able to look at the code and hence probably would have found the bug. So there's a whole range of issues. Another one that it's an architectural come implementation risk is, say you've got data plane and control plane. So control plane is the messages you have for controlling a system, whereas data plane is the data that's going across the system. Now, if you merge those two, then you are going to have all sorts of problems, where if you have them separated, you're all good. And so the Poly network hack, where they lost $600 million, that came down to them merging the control plane and the data plane. You've also got, say, operational stuff. So, say if you've got a multi-sig, and there are lots of, you say 15 out of 20 people need to sign this. So if it's the ability to pause the contract, that's really bad, because when you need to pause, you've got to quickly try and get, 15 people out of bed to do stuff and coordinate. Whereas maybe for upgrading the contract, you need to have, a large number. So there's a lot of operational stuff that is important. And so, I think that there are a lot of aspects, and a lot of it's all very complicated. And so, if you look at, say the Nomad hack, that one there was a operational path that didn't have the ability to pause. And so hence it could be just called over and over again with no ability to stop it from being called. As well as that, the code was upgraded. And when they did the code upgrade, they didn't test the code against the Ethereum mainnet data. And so if they had have actually run their test system against the data that was on chain, and so they could essentially try out the deployment, they would have realized they had a bug. So that was a methodology issue. There's also things like having a security vulnerability response plan. And so if you've got a vulnerability response plan, then you'll be ready to go if there is actually a hack. Whereas if you have to work it all out on the fly, it's generally not going to be anywhere near as good. So there's a lot to it with bridges, but a lot of that applies to any DeFi project.
All right, so just to sum up real quick, so we have 4 types of risks that you mentioned above, right? So it was the networking risk, it was the architecture risk, the operational risk, and the fourth one was implementation risk, right? Among four of these types of risk, which one is being used the most by hackers in order to exploit the contracts? What would you say?
It's a combination. I mean, if you have bad architecture, then implementation and operations isn't going to help you. But then equally, if you have bad operations or bad implementation, then the others aren't going to help you either. So you've got to have all of them. So it's a matter of having all of those different types of risk sorted out.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what we see from this year's data, the cross-chain bridge attacks are not that popular in 2023 anymore, as it was in 2022 in comparison. So we see a clear downtrend in this type of hacks this year. So what were the most significant developments over the last year that makes bridge attacks less significant and less frequent this year? You already mentioned the cross-chain risk framework that you were developing last year. Maybe you can add something here, something else that was developed.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's lots of people having a look at that framework suddenly. I'm sure there are a lot of people who have looked at it, but it takes time to change things. I think having multiple, multi-$100 million hacks has made people incredibly aware of the issues, And so if you're a bridge operator, I think that, a lot of them have probably spent an enormous amount of effort trying to improve their security. And so I think having all these people aiming to improve their security has probably helped a lot. So I think that's what it's really come down to. The reason why we've got fewer hacks this year is because there were lots of hacks in 2021, 22.
Yep, I got your point here. That can be understandable. So my next question is, could you share with us which bridges are the most reliable today? It's a very tricky question maybe, but which bridge architecture are the most successful, not being hacked at least, and what can you recommend to look into?
Look, I wouldn't want to recommend any bridge as such. So the Uniswap bridge assessment report came out recently, and it recommended Wormhole and Axelar. But that was for cross-chain governance. So it was just for a very narrow use case. So low rate, rarely used, but really highly important. And so if you're talking about a DeFi bridge where you're, want to transfer some ERC20 tokens, it's a completely different ball game. And so at the end of the day, it's a very complicated thing. And I know for myself, if I'm going to do some cross-chain, like moving stuff from chain A to chain B, I'll end up using MetaMask bridging. So MetaMask bridging uses bridge aggregators. The bridge aggregators use bridges. So the idea is that the bridge aggregators work out what they perceive to be good, solid bridges, and they're prepared to suspend bridges if they don't just think that they're still any good. And then MetaMask then on top looks at uses those aggregators. And so though you might lose, say, 0.5% or something, some small percentage, and you're giving it to Consensys, at the end of the day, if you do it using MetaMask, then it's going to get there, and it's lower risk. And for me, lower risk and having the money turn up is more important than trying to get that last cent, but maybe the money doesn't turn up. And as well, if you do it within MetaMask, then you're in MetaMask. You're not on a phishing site. Whereas I don't know. Sometimes I turn up to these these DeFi sites and I think, is this a real site or am I at a fake phishing site? And is it not a real site? So I think there's that concern as well. So that's why, at least for myself, when I've used done cross-chain stuff, I've actually used MetaMask.
All right, so I have one more question. It's more of a visionary one. So I've got to ask you, with all your experience, what's your take on the current Web3 security state in 2023? More importantly, where do you see it going, and what are the main issues we're facing in the space today? What is your vision on that?
Yeah, look, I think it would be really nice if the USA and their government, their authorities could, work out what rules they want to have. I think at the moment, you hear even people from within their SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, seemingly having dissenting voices on how things should be happening. And it just seems the ambiguity is not good. And so I think for the USA, that's not a good move. I think that it'd be good for them to sort that out. And I think that's a big risk. I think that so the contagion. So we had the Luna coin crash and that Terra stuff, and then that sort of helped highlight issues in FTX, and then the issues in FTX then I think are highlighting other issues, and it does seem like there's some moves against Binance, and Coinbase, but Binance, there seem to be some things which don't sound too good, and so yeah, I do wonder, like, if Binance has problems, and it were to go the way of FTX, that would have a massive impact on the industry. But it's really hard to know as from that perspective. Look, I think that blockchain's here to stay for sure, and I think that the Web3 gaming, it's providing real value to people. People play these games, these computer games, and they get really invested in them. And I think there's been some situations where, say, governments have, or in China at least, they essentially said, look, some game player had said something about democracy in Hong Kong. And so they just deleted the person's account, even though they had millions of dollars of in-game assets. And so I think, things like that do make people wonder. And so I think having the ability to play some game and then you've got some in-game asset that you can trade for cash with other people, I think is, that's really powerful. I mean, and I think it's also an enabler for people in, say, countries that maybe aren't as wealthy as, say, Belgium, Canada, and Australia, where, if you could, if you've got an internet connection and, I don't know, a PS5 or a computer of some sort, and you play some game, and then you're able to sell those in-game assets, you might be able to feed your family. This might be a way of really bringing yourself out of poverty, which I know it sounds crazy, so play a computer game and, like send home money to keep your family going. But I think it's going to be a real thing. So, yeah, look, I think that's going to happen. I think it'll be interesting to see whether, so Uniswap v4s come out, and it'll be interesting to see where the design for Uniswap v4s come out. So it'll be interesting to see where that takes us, because it's allowing essentially a plug-in, how I think of it is like a plug-in architecture. And so, there are advantages and disadvantages of that. I think the roll-up space is going to mature over the next year. So Immutable's coming out with our ZK EVM, which is, using Polygon technology under the hood. And I think there's a whole range, we've got ZK Syncs coming along, Consensys ZK EVM's going to be ready, we've got Scroll. And so we're going to have all of these different ZK technologies. So I think it's, quite exciting.
Yeah, great. And as you kind of mentioned about the gaming, that it kind of had an adoption for the blockchain in the world, right? That Ethereum Foundation launched quite a few year EIP proposals, basically 4771 and recent 6551 that was created by Future Primitive, the dudes that basically allow smart contracts to be an account. Can you talk a bit about it more and explain it to the audience from your perspective, how it works?
Yeah, look, I can't say that I know all the details, but look, the whole idea of account abstraction, I think, is a really powerful one. And so the idea that you can have a contract on chain, and you can, rather than you having to submit transactions, you can have a relayer submit a transaction for you, and then stuff can happen on chain. And so you can have this, rather than just a private key, public key, you can have a wallet which can have a whole heap of features and capabilities. And you can, not having to have a key pair can be really good. So you do need to have some way of authenticating with the wallet, but you're not, when you think of your account, the account that you've actually got is that smart contract. And so I think that's pretty powerful. And I think that it'll allow for different authentication schemes as well. So not just ECDSA, you could imagine using, other schemes and other ways. So At Immutable, for instance, we're using a 2 of 2 wallet. So we're aiming to allow the user to have an experience where they don't really need to know about their keys, and they're just able to authenticate with the system and then be able to access their on-chain wallet. So yeah, I think that's really powerful and really flexible.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. I want to ask you, we talked quite a bit about blockchain on Earth, but now let's take it to the space. Peter, I'm really intrigued by this. I know that you have done some quite research about the space blockchain application in space. And I know that with your kind of colleagues, you did a great job and kind of visionary implementation of it in the future. Can you explain a bit more and your vision on it?
Yeah. So really, you should be. I mean, I was a part of a team where we looked at blockchains in cislunar and so anyway, near Earth orbit and in interstellar space and out in the asteroid belt, and just looking at based on latency and time. So you could imagine you've got 2 spacecraft that are out in the outer solar system, and they want to negotiate a deal, and using blockchain as a way of doing that. So that was one thing that we looked at, was having essentially, I'll pay you for some propellant. So the idea is they use propellant to maneuver, and so you could imagine this exchange between these 2 robotic spacecraft out in the asteroid belt. So that was one thing. We actually designed a relatively unique blockchain technology to allow that to happen. Another thing that we worked on was this multi-factor authentication system for satellite control. And so, you can imagine that these satellites that we've got up in space, they can easily be, or if you were a hacker, you could take control, and then you could be able to take control of the satellite. So wouldn't it be good if there was a way of using, say, a blockchain system to essentially register that you want to do something, satellite checks, is this really you? Or, essentially having 2-factor authentication for IoT devices. And a satellite is essentially an IoT device. And so, so we worked on that and wrote a paper, and I think Dr. David Highland-Wood went off and presented over at some Institute of Aeronautics conference. So, yeah, that was pretty cool.
Okay, great. And I think the final question from our side, it would be from audience. We've collected some of them and choose the best. And the member of our community asked, so do you ever consider the possibility that National Security Agency could have fully or partially compromised all cryptography systems?
Yeah, look, so I worked with some of those people at one point to help them with something. And, they've got finite capabilities. I think that's the thing to think about, is that I think people overblow. They watch too many spy movies, and they sort of think that you can walk along the street and then someone in the NSA, MI5 or whatever can quickly bring up some security camera, and then next thing they know, they've got the plans for some building and all this sort of stuff. Most of that stuff's not real. And similarly for cryptography, so breaking, being able to break the elliptic curve cryptography. No, I think that using classical computing, definitely not. Using quantum computing, I think we're all going to hear about it. I think that the private sector is probably as good at that as the government, the NSA, and because there's a lot of money going into that sort of thing. In fact, you probably find a lot of the money going into it is from the NSA and others like them. So, yeah, whether quantum computers will blow everything out of the water, I don't know. I mean, it's a bit like nuclear fusion. It's going to happen sometime soon, and we've been hearing that for quite a while. Look, I think that there was an initial thought that by 2025, quantum computers would break everything by 2025, and that guesstimate was done in about 2015, and I think that's probably going to be wrong. And so I think that we've probably got at least till 2030, maybe 2035, before we need to race around and find new algorithms. But I don't think the NSA can break every blockchain. I think that there are far easier ways of doing things than that. And
I cannot pass the question about quantum computing, because for me it's quite intensive topic right now, because a lot of blockchains are scary about this big thing that can come and destroy everything. Can you say, as a true final question, more about the state of quantum computing right now in the blockchain industry?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I only see what you all see on the news. So I don't know. I mean, but that account abstraction we were talking about would help with that, because that would remove the ECDSA signature, and you could imagine you could have some other methodology. But it would be more than just blockchain that would have problems. I mean, we're all now using electronic money for everything. And so if all of the SSL, HTTPS sort of stuff suddenly stopped working, then we're all in big trouble. So, I think we've got a way yet to for all those protocols to be able to switch over to alternative cryptography. But look, good talking to you guys, and have a great rest of your day, night, and day. And
that's it's time to bring the episode of Rektoff to a close. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining our podcast today. Nice talking to you. Such an experienced person, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
I want to express my sincerest thanks to Dr. Peter Robinson for joining us today and for sharing his insights on the AI in security testing, the state of cross-chain bridges, and even the potential of blockchain's applications in space. If today's discussion has piqued your curiosity, we invite you to join us on Discord, check our website on rektoff.xyz, and continue to explore the fascinating world of Web3 security with us.
Stay tuned for more illuminating conversation with experts and innovators in the field. Remember, here at Rektoff, we are more than a podcast. We are a community committed to securing the future of decentralization. Until next time, stay secure and keep questioning the world around you.